Ah yes, the Dark Age. Hold up, is that fair to say? Maybe it's more so confusing than it is dark. The 2000s heavyweight division was a wild ride. Coming out of the Silver Age 1990s, the division was actually unified under the Lion Lennox Lewis. He'd gone through the ringer to reunify the division in the wake of Riddick Big Daddy Bo trashing the WBC title back in 1992. Lewis proved he was the best of the Silver Age and a talking point for the conversation of greatest heavyweights. But that was the 90s, and this is the 2000s. The zeros, the double O's, the noughties. Can Lennox Lewis continue his dominance into the new millennium? How about the remnants of the Silver Age? Evander Holyfield is aging but not out of it yet. Same can be said for Mike Tyson, Michael Moore, Ray Mercer, and others. Then there's the young bucks from the 90s who will be entering their primes, like David Tua, Shannon Briggs, Andrew Golota, Ike Ibeabuchi. Oh wait, not Ike. Unfortunately, not Ike. Alright, we ready to roll? No? What did I forget? Ah, yes! The KlitschBros. Iron Fist Vitali and Stillhammer Wladimir Klitschko made their debuts late in the 90s. It's no secret that we should expect greatness from these doctors to be, but will it come at the expense of Lennox Lewis? Speaking of the KlitschBros and Lennox the Lion, the evolution of the sport that you saw in Lewis and Riddick Bowe back in the 90s is continuing full force here in the 2000s, as height and weight are correlating to prosperity. Being 6'5" and up, along with weighing in at a 235-pound minimum and above, are emerging as staples of the division as it transitions in full from the 6'3", 210-pound era Muhammad Ali ushered in back in the 60s. It's a confusing, so-called mess of a decade ahead. Let me make it make sense. Buckle up. This is a timeline of the 2000s heavyweight division. The story of two brothers working together to maintain the division while establishing themselves as all-time greats without ever needing to lift a fist at one another. The story and proof of how it ain't over till it's over. Who better to open us up than the grandest enigma in the history of the sport? Iron Mike Tyson made his debut in Europe with a second-round knockout of Julius Francis. Francis was down twice in the first round and thrice in the second round. Off Tyson's name alone was the event a great success as a capacity crowd came out. Frank Warren attempted to entice Iron Mike to sign a promotional deal with him. His notable gesture was buying Tyson a watch worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. For anyone who needs the explanation, pounds are the British currency. Francis had advertisements placed on the bottom of his shoes. Is that a telltale that he knew he was losing? Apparently doing so is an old joke about a fighter being so bad. In more modern news, Julius Francis knocked out a man while working as a bouncer for Box Park back in 2022. Don't mess with the pros, people. Let's go, champ. Wait, what? He ain't saying that yet? I'm too early? Oh, okay, my bad. Anyway, I'll save that for the 2010s timeline. Shannon Briggs has recovered from his war with Francois Botha and is back in the ring against Warren Williams. He dropped Williams in the second and again in the third for the TKO. The man who sent Hasim Rahman out of the ring and into oblivion back in 1999 is back in action. Oleg Maskaev dropped Sedreck Fields twice in the sixth before receiving the victory when his man retired on his stool after the seventh. Good start to the decade. The 1996 super heavyweight gold medalist, Wladimir Klitschko, doubled down on said victory by knocking out Paea Wolfgramm in the opening round. Wolfgramm was the man Klitschko beat for the gold 4 years earlier. It was Vlad's 8th straight stoppage win since being upset by Ross Purity back in 1998. Good rebound for the younger KlitschBro as his older brother Vitali continues at the helm of the family name. Maybe one day Vlad will emerge to take the helm himself. We'll see. Coming out of the 90s in full blitz is the WBO titleist Vitali Klitschko. What's that? I'm saying his name wrong? Well, according to the Times, when Klitschko is fighting in the East, he's Vitali. When he's fighting out West, he wants to be called Vitali.
Is he Vitali or is he Vitali? In Eastern Europe, he's known as Vitali. Here, he wants to be known as Vitali.
Therefore, I will oblige by that for this contemporary timeline. The savior of the family name was making his third defense of his title against Byrd, who you may remember from the 90s and that monstrous matchup against Ike Ibeabuchi where he lost his O. Just mentioning Ike makes me sad because we won't be seeing how he would affect the division this decade. Byrd was also 3 months removed from his 2000s opener in which he TKO'd David Washington in the 10th and final round. Back on topic. Vitali led on all cards before he quit on his stool before the 10th could begin. Why did he quit? A torn rotator cuff, which is no small deal. Crazy to think that if his original challenger, Donovan Razor Ruddock, didn't pull out due to hepatitis, he would have been champion. Byrd, having taken this fight on 10 days' notice, was the new WBO titleist. Well, the family name now lies on the shoulders of the rebounding young brother, Vlad. Damn, I didn't know it would be this soon. I just said it last fight. It's the ever controversial Andrew Golota's first fight of the new millennium, and he's up against Marcus Rhode. It was a demolition job as Golota dropped his prey 5 times, the last yielding the stoppage in the third. 2 knockdowns were in the second, and the other 3 were in the third. On that last knockdown, Rhode almost fell out of the ring into the ground. Good start to the decade for the powerful Pole. One more thing to note that I should have in the 90s timeline. On December 20th of 1999, a month after the controversial loss to Michael Grant, Golota lost control of his car and crashed into a tractor trailer. The passenger, his friend, died as a result, and Golota himself was left injured. Some say his jab and overall left were never the same. I'd like to address that. He was already mentally shaky, and this couldn't have done him any favors. Perhaps survivor's guilt? I'm not sure, but I feel for the guy as he looks to continue his boxing journey. Shannon the Cannon is back in what he's deemed to be his most embarrassing career moment. He lost an 8-round majority decision to Sedreck Fields. Fields was 9-9 as a pro and went on to be a journeyman who finished at 22, 37-2. Briggs expected to get an easy knockout in payday, but had another thing coming. He's been derailed. Let's see how he bounces back. On the undercard of 2 big, 2 lesser-known giants clashed. 6'6" Wladimir Klitschko dropped his 6'5" challenger 4 times. Twice in the first and second rounds respectively. David Bostice was in tears after the fight. Klitschko's use of Tina Turner music was said to be a staple of all great Ukrainian fighters. I'll keep that in mind. There was anticipation afterward as to whether Vlad would speak English in his interview. In the post-fight interview, Vlad made it clear that he was sick of hearing about Ross Purity. He also said that he wasn't interested in Byrd, for that was his brother's business. It looks like the family name is in Vlad's hands now, given the embarrassment of the Byrd affair. Let's see how he steers the ship. He's back, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Wait, he's not undisputed anymore? Damn, already? Well, this goes back to the end of the 90s timeline. Remember how Lewis beat Evander Holyfield to become undisputed? Their contract entailed that the winner would first defend against the WBA's mandatory. That wound up being John Ruiz, who, by the hand of his promoter Don King, sued to prevent Lewis's next signed defense against Michael Grant. Lewis and Grant signed on January 15th. On April 12th, a federal judge ruled in their favor, and the WBA was forced to strip Lewis rather than wait out the winner of Lewis-Grant, of which Ruiz would have faced said winner for undisputed. The vacant WBA title would be granted to the winner of John Ruiz and number 2 contender Evander Holyfield. That bout would take place on August 12th. Meanwhile, here in the present, Lewis eviscerated Grant with relative ease behind 4 knockdowns. The first 3 were in the opening round and the final was in the second. There were clearly still leagues between Lewis and Grant as boxers. It reaffirmed Lennox's declaration that he was still undisputed. I'm sure most agreed. Also, one more thing. John Ruiz traded a shot at undisputed for a shot at 1 belt. Was he unsure that he could beat Lennox? Did he prefer an easier fight with Holyfield? This one decision splintered the title again. I mean, come on. You decide what to believe. Time for a doubleheader, another one. Oleg Maskaev returned to the ring 2 months later and won a TKO in the 4th over hard-hitting Derrick Jefferson. Maskaev dropped this man in the 1st and 2nd rounds. The first knockdown resulted in Jefferson breaking his ankle, and the fight was stopped due to his inability to walk properly. Man, Oleg Maskaev is really hurting guys out there. The last time we saw The Rock, he was knocked out of the ring by Oleg Maskaev, who fought on this undercard. He won his first fight of the 2000s against Marion Wilson 2 months before this affair. In his timeline debut, Hasim Rahman won a back-and-forth slugfest over Corrie Sanders. Both men tasted the canvas in the 3rd, and Sanders did so again in the 4th. The fight was stopped in the 7th. Very good win for The Rock. The sniper, Corrie Sanders, made his debut way back in 1989 and had only lost once before this bout against 36 victors. He beat Ross Purity back in 1998. Why do I mention that? Well, because he and Ross have something in common that you'll discover when we get to 2003. David Tua of New Zealand opened his new millennium by knocking out Obed Sullivan in the very first round. Not even a full minute passed into the match. Sheesh. Tua's campaign toward a title shot roared on, right alongside his new hair. 2 months later, for Golota at least, Andrew Golota returned to the ring against Orlin Norris. We last saw Norris in the no contest against Mike Tyson back in 1999. However you felt about that, he was decisioned on the present night by Golota in 10 rounds. Still, it was a good fight in which the competitors went back and forth. They lashed out at one another with some good shots and neither backed down. Check this one out. It's a good watch. Golota's next match would complete the triangle as he was to face the man who made much easier work of Norris. Tyson's back! That was the building of the bout, and the poster thought it was so clever having a picture of Tyson's actual back. Continuing his European leg, Mike Tyson made pathetically light work of former George Foreman challenger Lou Savarese. Tyson dropped his man 15 seconds in. Lou answered, and Tyson swarmed Savarese. Referee John Coyle attempted to step in, but was unable to stop the madness as he was thrown to the canvas by a berserk Iron Mike. Savarese dished some low blows to tame Tyson. When Coyle did manage to stop the fight, he awarded Mike the win by knockout. Tyson would apologize to Coyle later and admit many years after the fact that he was under the influence of cocaine for this bout. Tyson would also leave us with an iconic rant for the ages after the bout, confirming that he was coming for Lennox Lewis.
Man, what? I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. Lennox is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
Once again on a Lennox Lewis undercard is the younger KlitschBro, Wladimir. He started strong against Byrd by dropping his man in the first round, but failed to follow up until the fourth round, where he dropped Monty again. In the seventh, Vlad dropped Byrd thrice for the TKO. His display did not impress, and he wasn't thought to be a threat to Lennox Lewis. Rough start at the helm for Little Bro. On to the main event. The champ returned with a second round knockout of Francois Botha. The White Buffalo managed little to no offense as Lewis controlled the bout from start to finish. Botha entered the ring wearing what appeared to be a white buffalo. Fitting. The referee for this bout was Larry O'Connell, the judge who scored the first Lewis-Holyfield bout as a controversial and corrupt draw. He was understandably booed by the home crowd for Lewis. It was Lennox's first fight back home in England since his 1994 upset at the hands of the Atomic Bull, Oliver McCall. The Tua-Man is back. This time he knocked out former WBA cruiserweight titleist Robert Daniels in 3 rounds. It was rather light work for the contender, and he may have won before the fight even began thanks to the intimidation factor posed by his cultural entrance. Don't look now, but Tua is now ranked number 1 by the WBC and IBF. Since his 1997 loss to Ike Ibeabuchi in a record-breaking affair, Tua has won 10 straight, 9 of which were stoppages. His next fight is a big one. Don't miss it. The Rock is back 3 months after his slugfest with Corrie Sanders. Hopefully his head is clear now. He scored another 7th round stoppage win when Frankie Swindell quit on his stool before the 8th could begin. He cited that he'd suffered an eye injury. Rahman's momentum continued to climb, and he would reach perhaps his career's apex in his next opportunity. Well, it's the match I mentioned, and who's really excited? I'm not. Anyway, Evander Holyfield has a chance to become a 4-time heavyweight champ against John Ruiz. Remember Ruiz from the 90s timeline? I believe I featured him being decimated by David Tua on HBO's Night of the Young Heavyweights. Well, he'd won 11 straight since that embarrassment. The Real Deal, meanwhile, hashed out a very controversial decision to break Muhammad Ali's 3-time champion record. Ruiz and just about everyone else claimed it was a robbery. What do you think? It looks like John Ruiz's alleged avoiding of Lennox Lewis has backfired big time. Whoever won this fight didn't really matter anyway, given we know that the Lion would defeat them. With it being Holyfield, we know for a fact. I'd also like to address some of the competitors' comments after the fight. Holyfield said that this fight should be considered legit for 2 reasons. Number 1, Lewis didn't follow the rules by fighting Ruiz, and he felt that he'd beaten Lennox back in 1999 anyway. That was reason number 2. Now, I'm a fan, Real Deal, but I'm not too sure about either of those claims, man. Then there was Ruiz stating that Lennox Lewis was clearly avoiding him because the champ had stolen the Michael Grant fight from him and parted ways with the WBA title. Again, not too sure about this one. All Ruiz had to do was wait out the Grant fight and he would have gotten the shot for Undisputed that he claims he wanted so badly. Why sue to be able to go after the WBA title against an aged Holyfield? Just why? This doesn't make much sense to me, but decide what you will, boxing fans. Should Evander Holyfield be the Undisputed champion? And is Lennox Lewis ducking John Ruiz? Let me know what you think. As mentioned in the 90s timeline, Felix Savin captured his 3rd straight gold medal at heavyweight, mirroring the success of his predecessor, Teofilo Stevenson. He was the third three-time gold medalist behind Stevenson and Laszlo Papp. He defeated Sultan Ibragimov, who would turn pro soon after. Savan announced his retirement afterward, and we've lost yet another would-be plus to the pros as another Cuban great chose to remain an amateur. Ruslan Chagayev was another competitor in the tournament who you'll see in the pros down the line. At super heavyweight, Audley Harrison of Great Britain captured the gold and became the first British fighter to do so at super heavyweight. Remember, Lennox Lewis represented Canada at the 1988 Olympics, not Britain. Harrison would turn pro in 2001. Other notable names at super heavyweight included Calvin Brock and Samuel Peter. We've got an exciting one on deck here between Kurt Johnson in his timeline debut and Oleg Maskaev. Johnson was hurt in the first but bounced back and knocked Maskaev out of the ring in the fourth for the knockout. Wow! Looks like it all came back to Maskaev. Somewhere deep in the distance, wherever he was, Hasim Rahman had to have had a shit-eating grin on his face. Kurt Johnson, by the way, made his pro debut back in 1993 and now had a record of 30-0. I am also my brother's keeper. What do you mean by also? I'll explain later. Well, whether he wanted it or not, it's a chance for Wladimir Klitschko to avenge the family name against Chris Byrd. He did just that by decisioning Byrd behind 2 knockdowns. They came in the 9th and 11th rounds. It was Byrd's first fight since the Vitali controversy. Wladimir Klitschko is the new WBO champion, his first major world title. Well, depending on who you ask. Whether the WBO title is a major title or not is still up in the air. Mike Tyson concludes an active enough year against the almost equally controversial Andrew Golota. Both men are biters and can be unhinged. Golota ended Riddick Bowe's career, and Tyson ended Evander Holyfield's tenure with a full set of ears. Who's dirtier? Let's find out. Tyson bashed Golota with power punches and was ahead after 2 rounds of action. He also dropped the powerful pole in the first round. Golota refused to fight as the 3rd round started, and Tyson was awarded the fight via TKO. Fans threw garbage and drinks at Golota as he exited, and it was later found that he had a broken bone in his face that could have pierced his brain. Andrew also claimed that Mike was headbutting him and that the referee didn't punish Tyson. Does that sound familiar? Tyson tested positive for marijuana after the fight, and the result was changed to a no contest. Are you kidding me? Wow, and I don't even blaze. Anyway, did you expect any different a showing from a fight between 2 of the 90s most controversial fighters? I hope you enjoyed this because you won't see Andrew Golota for another 3 years. Tyson continued his march of chaos toward Lennox Lewis. For his 3rd and final defense of the year, Lennox Lewis masterclassed David Tua of New Zealand in a wide unanimous decision. No, seriously, Lewis dominated the fight and nullified the explosive offense of Tua behind his dynamic jab. Lennox piled up the points, stayed at the range of his jab, and occasionally lashed out with his own storied power to keep Tua humble despite the challenger's growing desperation for a knockout. It was the first time Tua was ever cut. The fight was booed by the Vegas crowd, obviously, because they wanted to see fireworks. It's another chapter in why, even to this day, American fight fans don't like the Lion. I'm sure he'd tell you himself, though, that that's too damn bad, and he doesn't care. The champ did his job, and I commend him. Light work. Vitali Klitschko returned from the shame of his WBO defeat with a 12-round unanimous decision over Timo Hoffman. The near 6'8" Hoffman became the first man to go the distance with the Iron Fist, despite barely winning a round. Vitali became the new European heavyweight champion. Y2K is in the books. Here are Ring Magazine's top 10 heavyweights. As it stands, Lennox Lewis is absolutely still the undisputed heavyweight champion. He will remain the man to beat until someone emerges to do so. No politics or saying otherwise will change that. The WBO title saw a chapter of my brother's keeper come into play with the KlitschBros. The WBA has chosen to make their title an absolute joke, which is sadly in line with their past decisions anyway. BoxingPedia's upset of the year goes to Byrd over Vitali Klitschko. Byrd is darn lucky that Klitschko had that shoulder issue. He paid for it later in the year anyway. Shannon Briggs losing to Sedreck was a close second. The heavyweights didn't receive a single round of the year honor in the 2000s, so I'll be handing them all out myself. We've got a sea of options here. We got Wladimir Klitschko dropping Byrd in the 7th round. We got Mike Tyson abolishing Lou Savaries and assaulting the referee in the opening round. Oleg Maskaev getting a taste of his own medicine and being knocked out of the ring by Kirk Johnson in the 4th. Andrew Golota demolishing Rhode and almost knocking him out of the ring with 3 knockdowns in the 3rd. These are all worthy contenders, but I'm going to give the advantage to the champion. Lennox Lewis dropping Michael Grant and destroying his reputation in the opening round of their bout, despite the hype, is the BoxingPedia Round of the Year. Likewise, the heavyweights didn't receive a lone Fight of the Year honor in the 2000s, so again, the choice is mine. I'm awarding Fight of the Year to Lennox Lewis in his absolute masterclass over David Tua of New Zealand. It was one-sided, sure, but it was also a great display of how far he'd come as a pugilist specialist. In hindsight, it was foreshadowing of how he could handle another fighter of similar size and caliber. Without question, BoxingPedia's Fighter of the Year 2000 is Lennox Lewis. The undisputed champion is still in top form and proved it with his 3 defenses. He's in a class of his own and remains unopposed, undisputed, and unchecked. On January 14th, Tommy Morrison was sentenced to 2 years in prison for charges he picked up in September of 1999. He was pulled over for erratic driving and was found to be in possession of drugs and weapons. While waiting for his trial, he was arrested again for intoxication and weapon possession. Yikes! Never mind the charges he accumulated throughout the 90s that I didn't mention. On February 29th, Riddick Bowe was sentenced to 30 days in prison. The sentence was supposed to be 18 to 24 months, but brain damage was cited. It was overturned, and Bowe would serve 17 months in federal prison. This is the aftermath you may remember I covered regarding Bowe back in the 90s timeline. First Tommy, now Riddick. We got some jailbirds on our hands from the 90s timeline. On October 31st, Halloween Day, Knockout Kings 2001 released for the PlayStation. Its next-gen PlayStation 2 version released the next year. It was the 3rd game in the Knockout Kings series, which I neglected to mention started back in 1998 with Knockout Kings 1999. Knockout Kings 2000 released in 1999. If you're an old-school gamer, you remember the fun. The Knockout Kings series was kinda, but also kinda not, preceded by the Foes of Ali game from 1995. On November 17th, Larry Holmes had a rematch with Mike Weaver 21 years after their 1979 WBC title bout. I covered this back in the 70s timeline, but just a reminder that they were due for their trilogy bout 3 years ago in 2021, since they like fighting 21 years apart. We're waiting, gentlemen. Also on November 17th, did Michael Moorer return from a 3-year layoff. He stopped Lorenzo Boyd in 4 rounds, and you may remember Boyd as a man Mike Tyson crushed on his rise to the top back in the 80s. Moorer hadn't fought since he showed great heart in a thrashing at the hands of Evander Holyfield back in 1997. Funny enough, that night was the last prime appearance of the real deal too. Nikolai Valuev won his 3 fights in 2000. What's that? Who's Nikolai Valuev? He made his debut back in 1993 and had accumulated a perfect record of 23 wins, 20 of which didn't go the distance. This guy is a 7-foot-tall monster, at least in stature, and we're going to keep track of him until he makes his timeline debut down the line. Sergey Liakovich won his 6 fights on the year. He debuted back in 1998 and now held a record of 13-0. Layman Brewster won 2 of his 4 fights. He debuted back in 1996 and actually suffered his first setbacks in 2000. Hopefully he can bounce back because destiny awaits him in 2004. Is there even a slither of hope that the heavyweight title can come back together in one piece so soon to its splintering? I presume not, because the WBA seems content in its circus show starring John Ruiz and Evander Holyfield. Even if the big 3 came back together, would it be considered legit now with the WBO factoring more into the picture? The better Wladimir Klitschko looks, the more a case can be made that the next undisputed champion will need to collect all 4 titles. I'm as confused as you are. Let's move on and see what 2001 has in store.